Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we are back with another discussion topic. This one we actually it's something you guys voted on to have me talk about on stream, so if you haven't tuned into one of those yet, catch me live on Sundays, except for yesterday. But next Sunday I will be live, so catch me live at 5:30 Pacific time for sure. But yeah, I mentioned to you all that I was contemplating doing a video ranking and comparing each of the three gear systems we've had within the Division 1 and 2 thus far, and a lot of people positively reacted to that idea. So here we are. Basically what I think I'm going to do is just go through each of the three systems, list each of their pros and cons that I hold personally, because yes, they all have them, and at the very end I want to quickly talk about how the next potential gear system could learn and take various aspects from each of the three we've had so far. Sound good? Let's dive in. Alright, kicking off with the OG gear system in the Division 1, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to use the kind of final product of Division 1's gear. Basically, if you don't know, the gear system in Division 1 underwent several changes throughout its life. None of those were as drastic or transformative as Gear 2.0 was to the first system in Division 2, right? But they certainly did change a fair bit from 1.0 or launch to 1.8. Stuff like removing the armor rolls on gear, redefining prototype mods, I think they did at one point, reducing the number of minor attribute rolls, and I think the argument could be made that 1.8's gear system in the Division 1 was kind of like a Gear 1.5 from the original version, but not on the same level as Gear 2.0 in Division 2, where they scrapped how the gear fundamentally rolled, looked, and everything. So yeah, just for simplicity's sake, and because not a lot of people still remember that original gear system, we're just going to say Division 1 had a single gear system, that being the one that is still live today in 1.8.3. Okay, starting there was a lot to love with this gear system, and I'm sure a lot of us are aware of that. Let's start with the pros. First off, the gear piece individuality / uniqueness. This is a big gripe of mine with the current Gear 2.0 system in Division 2, and we'll get to that, but the fact that every gear piece in Division 1, that being the chest piece, mask, knee pad, backpack, glove, and holster, the fact that each of those 6 pieces had a uniqueness to them and played their own role in making a build was fantastic in my mind. For example, masks offer different talents and different stat rolls than other pieces. Crit chance was much more rare in Division 1, and if you wanted high amounts of it, then you'd have to seriously consider sacrificing your minor roll attribute on your mask to obtain it. Gloves was the only place you could get specific weapon damage boosts, and holsters were an essential component to a build because it offered all 3 of the main stats on one gear piece. Overall, that individuality in build making was so fun because it felt like you were really tinkering and connecting all of these different wires to create one epic creation of your own. Another big one for me was the main stat sources. Now this is going to contradict a little bit something I'll say later on, but while it proved to be a bit of a sore spot for balancing, the ability to influence your toughness, for example, from main stat rolls, health attribute rolls, and gear mods was just simply fun. If I selected my main stat rolls on my gear and felt like I still wanted a bit more firepower, I could slap on 3 firearms mods and feel recuperated. Again, it was not the most balanced thing in the world, I will say, but it was very satisfying. And the last one is, of course, guns. Good God, guns have never been the same since Division 1. There was just something so satisfying about getting the right talents in the right slots to make the requirement unlocks align properly with your build, and it just hasn't been matched since then. Could the talents have been better balanced or reworked a bit? For sure, but that doesn't erase the fun of chasing and acquiring a Godroll M4, for example. So guns definitely have to make it onto that list. Let's shift over to the cons now, starting with talents. Talents just simply weren't that good. Don't get me wrong, were there standouts? Yes, stuff like Vigorous, Reckless, Refresh, Specialized, Savage, Nimble at certain points of balancing, but by and large, the majority of gear talents in Division 1 were simply not very exciting and not that good. None of the knee pad talents were desirable. Ever, except for short bows, but those were an exotic. Talents didn't fundamentally shape your build like we've seen in later iterations. Is that a necessity in a build system? No, but they just didn't have much appeal in the Division 1, and so that's why they have to go on the con side for me. Alright, I'm going to say it, and I might get some hate for it, but exotics are another con. I always see people saying they want to return to Division 1's exotic system, where you can just slot exotics into every slot, and every time I just think, why? This is clearly a game where the developers care about balance. That doesn't mean they've always gotten it right, and that doesn't mean they always stay on top of it, but clearly they try and will continue to keep trying to keep things balanced both in PvE and PvP. And if you can't understand why they don't allow the use of more than one exotic gun and gear piece in Division 2, then I don't know what to tell you, because they're so much better than Division 1's exotics were. Now again, were there standouts? Absolutely. Barrett's chest, Ninja Bike backpack, Skull MC gloves, the house, the bullfrog, probably a few others. But the vast majority of exotics in Division 1 were unexciting and unimpactful in gameplay to the point where they felt like wastes of space in your stash. And as much as you want to look back on the good exotics, you can't forget how many more bad ones there were. Alright, well that's my pro and con breakdown of Division 1's gear system. Now let's move on to Division 2's Gear 1.0 system, aka Year 1's gear system before Gear 2.0 came out alongside Warlords. This one I think surprised me the most upon preparation for this video, because while it certainly had its flaws that Gear 2.0 addressed, it actually had a lot of cool things that, I just think we're kind of missing a bit in current day Division 2. So let's just begin with the pros again. Funny enough, we're going to kind of do a total flip of what we just discussed, starting with talents. Now let's be clear, a good amount of the gear talents and even the weapon talents here were pretty undesirable. Stuff like, what were they called? Entrenched? Patience, I think it was. Just not very good. But how much fun was it to be able to get talents on every piece of gear? It was great. Even just getting like devastating for a flat 5% weapon damage increase on your gloves and holster felt fun. Maybe it wasn't really that impactful because you could just get that in other ways now in Gear 2.0, but I don't know. There was just something about it. Did it make it harder to grind for a perfect roll? Yes. Do I care? Not really. So that's why it's going to be on there. Now exotics is also another pro for me. While I don't think we've ever seen exotics handled perfectly in either Division 1 or 2, this is where I think they were at their best for a few reasons. One, unlike something like the Thompson in Division 1, which was increased hipfire damage, every exotic in Division 2 Year 1 had a distinct talent, and that played out to a distinct playstyle. Were those always good? No, but they did have always some specific niche purpose that allowed you to do things that you couldn't do with other guns. So that's one, but the same could be said there for Year 2, right? So the second reason is that they were actually rare, and you had to farm for them. Unlike Year 2, where you can just acquire the vast majority of exotics from any targeted source, a lot of the Year 1 exotics had specific unlock points and unique quest lines. The BTSU gloves only came out of Camp White Oak. The Chatterbox had a unique quest. The Chameleon, I want to say, was only from bounties when it was out for like a month in TU7 before Warlords. Maybe. That one I'm not sure on. But this part might be personal preference, but personally I far more enjoy a system where each exotic feels unique and rewarding to obtain, given the method for doing it, not just, oh, here's one for doing a random control point. Alright, and then last up, the infinite grind. Again, some might not agree here, but let me explain. Upon reflection, I appreciated the system of grinding for the optimal distribution of stats rather than a god-rolled bar. If you'll recall, the Year 1 system revolved around every main roll kind of eating a certain percentage of your total rolls on one piece. So if the max armor roll was 20%, let's say, and the max weapon damage roll was 20%, then 10 and 10 of each would be the most you could get out of each one, and that's one way you could fill out your total stat roll, if that makes sense. Or you could have 12 and 8 of those two, or 15 and 5. You get the idea. Now, was this a perfect system? No, and we'll touch on that in a second when I switch to the cons, but the idea of saving variations of distributions in order to create different types of builds and compositions sounds so much more fun and engaging than the system we have now, where I collect one god roll damage profile Sombra holster, and it's all I need on any damage build until the end of time. And overall, the idea that there's always different combinations and distributions to chase has an inherently more replayable factor than what we have now. But now let's talk cons, because there were obviously some big ones. First off, the lack of meaningful stats on gear. Holy god, this franchise has never seen as boring and awful of metas as it did during Division 2's Year 1. Having weapon damage, armor, and skill power practically be the only things you cared about on rolls on a gear piece, that was so unfun. I'm sure there were smaller stats that I'm forgetting about that were somewhat relevant, but I just remember grinding non-stop to try and get the perfect armor, total armor, and weapon damage combination. And that just could have been so much more engaging if there had been more choice. The one thing, and not the only thing, but one of the things that caused that was crit range, which if you don't remember was a system they added at launch where every gun in each class had a specific range at which you could hit crits in, whereas outside of that you just couldn't do it. So like for ARs, you never saw a crit AR build. SMGs sometimes, but overall just added on this huge issue of those same three rolls being all you cared about. And that ruined what was otherwise a pretty interesting system, I thought. And then we have the lack of clarity for how good a roll was. So because this system was where you couldn't really get a god rolled piece per se, that led to a lot of confusion about how good your rolls were on that piece you acquired. Obviously Gear 2.0 remedied this by having the bar below each roll, but that only works if each roll is its own separate slider. And that wasn't the case in Year 1 system, where each roll drew from the item's total capacity. I think there could have been a solution to show how each stat was occupying the piece's total capacity, but we didn't get that, so it's a con overall. And then last up, skill power. Do I even need to go into this? It was convoluted, unnecessary. Basically, that's enough said. Skill power was not good. All right, and the last up, we've got Gear 2.0. Basically, what sparked this whole discussion, because to this day, a lot of people still talk about, was this really worth it to lose the previous systems we've had? So let's go. Starting with the pros, the actual choice in main stats. Like I said in Division 1 section, I did enjoy having a few options to boost up your primary stats, but I also think that part of having a good and balanced gear system is that it's crucial to make the player actually choose between different stats. None of this stuff where you can get weapon damage and armor on every piece like Gear 1, and so choice has never been better demonstrated, I feel like, than in Gear 2.0's main stats, where you have to choose on each of your 6 pieces between weapon damage, armor, and skill tiers. So bravo there. Next up, for another pro, skill tiers themselves pretty much fixed everything that was wrong with skill power in year 1. It was simplified. The skill empowerment just worked so much better. And yeah, there's not really too much to say. I think it's a good system and not much to change there. Lastly, the attempt for a broader variety of talents. I say attempt because we know too well that there are plenty of bad talents right now in the game, but never before have we had such a good balance of types of talents, in my opinion. You have ones that are good for solo damage, like Obliterate. You have solo survivability, like Unbreakable. You have team survivability, Vanguard, team healing, Empathic Resolve. There's just so many more options for impactful talents that can articulate both solo play and group play that it's a great variety to have, in my opinion. Okay, and finally, the final con category. First off, lack of individuality, aka boring gear. It drives me nuts that gloves, knee pads, and holsters are all identical under Gear 2.0. There's no unique talents, no specific roles that each item can get, no certain roles that they play in your build. Like, they're literally all just stat sheets. Those 3 items I talked about, and the other ones aren't even that different. Like, the mask is basically the same, it just has 1 mod slot. Oh, big deal. It just really sucks, and it makes build making in general that much less engaging from my point of view. The second one, no choice. Like I said before, choice is essential to balance and engagement, and Gear 2.0 strips all of that. Obviously, I just talked about the main stats. The choice there is great, but you want crit chance? Sure, just roll it on every damn piece of your gear, and 10 on your watch, and 15 on your gun. It just reduces that feeling of accomplishment so heavily, in my opinion. And obviously, it's not just crit, but having every gear piece have the exact same pool of stats to choose from, it just homogenizes the build variety and build system so heavily that it just isn't that fun. And when I think back to previous gear systems, I'm just like, man, I really miss that, different pieces used to be unique, and that's really not the case anymore. Next up, guns. Oh man, they're just bad. The vast majority of gun talents right now suck, and there's literally nothing compelling about grinding for a new gun. They're all the same. They just have slightly different roles. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. Next up, I'll quickly throw in the removal of talent requirements. Obviously, restricting talents to chests and backpacks on their own has proved to be an unpopular decision over time, but removing the talent requirements has severely screwed over PvP. Looking at you, Adrenaline Rush and Intimidate. And so overall, it was just a weird decision. So I'm going to throw that in the con category here. All right. Those are my pros and cons of each of the 3 gear systems we've seen across the Division 1 and 2. It took a little while, but we got through it. I'm definitely curious which parts you guys agree and disagree with, so let me know that down below. But like I said at the start, given that ranking I just did, I now want to comment on what I think would be the ideal for the next major gear system, hopefully, and if we ever do get one in something like the Division 3. To save time, I'm not going to do a full outline, and that wasn't really the point of this video, right? So instead, I just want to mention one pro that I listed from each of the 3 systems that I think should absolutely be incorporated into the next gear system. So from Division 1 system, I think I would have to choose the way that the guns worked. It was dynamic enough to create a fun grind while still keeping the concept of guns simple, and I would just love to see it return. From Division 2's Year 1 system, it would definitely be the alternative way that they approached a linear god roll system, that being the whole stat allocation dealio. Obviously, I would change a lot of it to incorporate more meaningful stats into the equation and create more choice, but on the surface, having that sort of system in comparison to a god roll system sounds more enticing, personally. And then from the post-Warlords Gear 2.0 system, I would have to go with the concept of choice, both in the main stats, and then hopefully bringing that over to some of the more minor attributes as well. And I honestly think having those 3 pillars and then incorporating more positives from past experiments like the skill tier system, like more random exotics, having a combination of meaningful active talents as well as more minor passive ones across every gear piece, and just making every piece of gear more unique and individual in general, it would just lead to a lot more fun and a lot of success down the road for whatever game or update this would potentially be included in, one day in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Like I said earlier, definitely leave your thoughts down below. I'm curious what your own pros and cons are for each of these systems and which ones people generally like best. I have a feeling I know what it'll be, but I'm certainly interested to hear your thoughts. All right, everyone. Well, that is going to do it for me. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. And until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.